As some of you may have seen last year, I made the transition from sim racing into real racing, having done half the series of GT World Challenge Europe with Garage 59, and at the final round in Jeddah we actually got a class podium. Of course, it's fair to say I've got a little bit of prior experience behind the wheel of a race car. I did British GT, had a little bit of karting experience, but how did I fast track my progress to get myself on that level? I would put it purely down to this simulator right here. So if we look at the hardware for a minute and the various bits of equipment I add onto the rig for real life prep, the main one, virtual reality. So these are MetaQuest 3s, pretty sure they're the best you can, well, they're the best I could find online anyway, and they are insanely good. The reason for that, it gives you that 3D perception. You can see the depth of the track and everything in front of you, whereas a 2D monitor, you don't get that, so the way you look into corners is a little bit different. So as well as the VR, we've also got a haptic motor on the back of the brake pedal, which is going to give me the sensation of ABS, which you do feel in the real car. It's quite a weird feeling when you hit the brake pedal and you can feel the ABS working against your foot. It's quite a weird sensation, so if I can get used to that at home, it's only going to benefit me. Next thing is the steering wheel. So usually I'm running this Cube Controls Formula wheel, which is quite a generic wheel. It's good, it's a good wheel, but it's a little bit different to the McLaren wheel, for example. So fortunately on the rig you can see I've got a McLaren replica steering wheel of the 720S GT3, and it just, again, it familiarises me with where the buttons are, how the dials work. It's one thing less to get used to when I get to the track. So the obvious thing I'm missing is motion, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The first thing is cost. Obviously motion's very expensive, and the second thing is a lot of the motion systems I've tried are very delayed. If anything, it gives me false feedback. Now, if I find a motion system I can try that's relatively cheap, I can justify getting it, then that would be great. Of course, it's going to add quite a lot of immersion, feeling all that stuff through the seat of your pants sort of feeling. That is what is missing at the minute. And it's fair to say after I come home from every race, I'm always tweaking something on the sim, whether it be hardware or software, to get it that little bit closer to the real car. So yeah, let me know down in the comments below, what would you add or change on the rig to make it more realistic? I'd be intrigued to see if there's any good ideas out there. Okay, so next thing, if we look at the rig ergonomically for a minute, that's a big word, I know. You can see it is a GT position, and I've tried to get it as close to the McLaren as possible just from feel. Does my back feel at the right angle? Does this feel right? Do my legs feel at the correct length to the pedals? All that sort of stuff. I've not got a measuring ruler out and made sure it's millimeter perfect to the McLaren. I don't think that's really necessary. It sounds like a lot of wasted time, to be honest. So yeah, it's close enough, but it probably is a little bit different. I don't think seating position at the end of the day is that important. The key things is the feeling through your hands, the pedals, what you're seeing with your eyes. Those are the important things. It's close, but it's not exactly like the real car. It's not millimeter perfect. It's not going to feel exactly the same. The force feedback's not going to feel exactly the same, but it's close, and it's enough for me to get my eye in ahead of a race weekend, which is the most important thing. And yeah, hopefully over time I can get it closer and closer, and eventually I can maybe get it very, very close one day. So that's hardware and the rig itself. There are a few tweaks I make to the settings and the software on the sim. Let's get into that. Okay, so software and settings stuff. Let's quickly flick through this. First thing, let's look at the pedal software. So Heisenbelt, I run Heisenbelt Ultimate Pluses. You can see I've got a completely linear curve on all the three pedals. I run 60 kilos of pedal force, which on a rig feels like quite a lot. In the real car, when you've got G-force throwing you forward, you'll reach 60 kilos very easily. I mean, you're usually reaching between 100 and 130 bar in a heavy braking zone, which, yeah, so 60 kilos on the static rig feels about right. I'm running the soft elastomer, which I do for esports. I just can't be bothered to change it for the hard one, and it still feels fairly representative compared to the real car pedal. The key thing I've changed on the rig in terms of pedals from esports to real life prep is I don't run any dead zones when I prep for the real car. So in esports I run dead zones. It helps your pedal inputs be a bit more clean, and it makes sure you're not brake dragging on the straights and stuff like that. Whereas in the real car, you don't have dead zones, obviously. I try and get used to the fact that there are no dead zones. If in the real car, if you're very lazy with your feet and you might be dragging the brake, you might be dragging the throttle, you have to be really disciplined with your feet like that. So if I can get used to that on the rig, then it's one less thing to think about when I get to the track of the weekend. So in terms of my force feedback settings for this video and for the Jeddah prep, I used a set of Corsa. My SimRacing profile's on the screen right now. You can see 900 wheel rotation, all the various settings are there. So if you want to try it with your own SimRacing, you can. There you go. Fairly standard settings, to be honest. So yeah, the car and track version. So for Jeddah, I used Assetto Corsa. It was, out of all the sim titles, Jeddah, it was the best version of Jeddah I could find. I wouldn't say it's the best car version, but I think in a lot of cases the track version is more important than the car version. Obviously you want to have ideally a good car version with a good track version, but the important thing is to learn the track. You know, fortunately I've been in this car before, but I've never been to the track before. So it's important I try and bridge that gap. Can I learn the track as much as possible? Obviously Rennsport has a version of Jeddah. There's a few different Assetto Corsa versions as well, but this was the one I thought that looks the most realistic for me, comparing it with real life onboards and stuff like that. So yeah, what else do I change? I mean, I do crank the force feedback up a little bit, so I'll probably run this SimiCube Ultimate at 8 Newton meters, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's not that strong, the feedback you get through the wheel in the real car. Obviously GT3 is a power steering, which helps. So yeah, this wheelbase is capable of 32 Newton meters, and I'm running it at 8, so 25% of what it can do. I'll also crank the graphics right up to the max. Fortunately, my PC will allow that, even in VR, and within the MetaQuest software, I run that VR headset all the way to the max in terms of settings as well. So fully maxed out on the VR headset, fully maxed out in the graphics settings, just to make sure it looks as realistic as possible. Obviously, it still looks like a sim in a game, but it gets it as close as I can get it, if you know what I mean. But yeah, the track and car mod, guys, I'll leave a link to those in the description below, and along with the setup I use as well. I did tweak the setup for about an hour to get it as close to the real car as I could in that time frame. Obviously, you can get these things closer, but there comes a point where it's just not worth that extra little bit. I just need it to be roughly there. And yeah, the final thing, so if you guys want to see what lap time you can do with this combo on Assetto Corsa, these are the conditions I'm using. So 11 AM, clear weather, optimum track, 26 degrees ambient, no wind. Yeah, let me know down in the comments below what lap time you can achieve. But yeah, that's all the software and settings. Let's get into some driving. All right, so headsets on. Let's leave the pits. A couple of key things on this outlap we'll talk about, right? So the first thing, as we mentioned earlier, the VR, that's the big game changer for me when it comes to real life prep, because it adds that 3D, the depth perception I was on about. So I can look into corners when I can look at the apex as I go through a corner, whereas on a 2D screen, you only really move your eyes, whereas right now I'm moving my entire head to see. It just adds a completely new dimension to the driving, which is realistic. So when I get to a race weekend and drive the real car, I'm already used to that way of driving, whereas if I just prepped on a monitor, I'd have to get used to this on the first few laps of driving the real car, which is just not ideal. The next thing is the brake haptic. So when I smash the pedal here, you can hear the brake pedal sort of rumbling. I'm using SimHub in conjunction with this SimMagic brake haptic, which is really good. It's really cheap as well, actually, and all the effects it does offer. So you can do like 20 something different effects, like rumble strips and G-force and all these things. Honestly, the only one I found realistic was the ABS. So I've got that maxed up all the way to 100%. And yeah, every time I hit the brake pedal hard and the ABS in the game triggers, I can feel that on my foot. And it is maybe a tiny bit delayed, but generally it's pretty useful. So yeah, the other thing is steering wheel map. So you can see I've mapped the buttons to the relevant button on the steering wheel. So in the game, I can see this one's the pit speed limiter. So if I go down to first gear and then press that, it's obviously the same one in game. So it just gets me used to the arrangement of buttons and stuff. TC's up here, ABS is over here on the right. So that's all the same. And yeah, the other thing you can do on the sim as well as just driving and trying to get quicker and do lap times is things like the pit entry. You know, I have no idea what the pit entry is going to be like at Jeddah. The sim gives me a rough idea of what it's going to be like. So I can see, right, there's a bridge there. This has got a left bit, then a little right kink. Then it comes to the pit entry line's actually going to be there. So it just gets me used to those different markers. Whether they're fully realistic or not, I don't actually know, because I've not been to Jeddah. And the same with the pit exit. You know, I can obviously let go of the pit limiter there, and then I'm going down this little narrow bit of section, the left-hander, opening me up onto the real track. So it turns out this track mod is really good, and that is very realistic, the pit entry and the pit exit. So when I got to the track, in a way I felt like I'd done it before. I knew where to look, I knew where the references were, and all these things add up. So because it's such a high pressure environment at a real race, especially GT World Challenge, and especially in my situation where I don't actually know when my next race is going to be, and I've got to make sure I deliver, every little box I can tick is worth doing. It's a lot easier to talk when I can't see anyone looking at me.
That's fair enough.
I feel like I'm just in a different world.
So you see, you're speaking really well now.
Shall I just wear the VR headset for the intro? Okay, so we're going to go for a hot lap, full push lap. So in real life, my qualifying time at Jeddah was a 2:02. That's with about half a tank's worth of fuel, so about 60 litres of fuel, because I was the first of the 3 drivers qualifying. So new tyres, as we are in the game, let's just give this a proper go and see what lap time we end up on. So exiting the final corner, going down the pit straight, making sure my shift points are bang on. Braking reference for turn 1's probably around just after the 150 board on the right. Down the gears, you can hear the ABS going nuts. Decent exit off T2. Going down to T4 then. Went a little bit deep at T4. Here's just about making sure we're very smooth and gentle on throttle. No sudden movements. Force feedback is quite strong actually, to be honest. Exiting sector 1 then all the way down to T13, the long banked left-hander. Down to 3rd, come off the brake, let it roll. Back on power, get close to the wall. That was a bit too close probably. That was a pretty decent section there. So this bit's a nice flat out section, you can catch your breath a little bit. This track is absolutely crazy. I mean, they call it the fastest street track in the world. You can see absolutely why. Looking for the 100-metre board then. Try and keep it within track limits. So there are 27 corners on this track. I wouldn't say all of them are corners though. And then we've only got one more to go really. The final left-hander. Looking for the 100 board on the right. Decent exit off the final corner. Let's see what the lap time's going to be. So yeah, in real life it was a 2:02. Take the shortest distance to the line. Across the line we're going to do a 2:0. So that was 0.2 seconds, 0.2 of a second quicker than my real life quali time. I'm out of breath. Whew. So yeah, pretty close in the end. 2:0 for me on that lap there. 2:02 in real life. As is the case in sim racing, we always tend to be a bit quicker on the sim just because there's little exploits you can do and you aren't governed by the physics of real life. In the sim during prep for this I actually did a 1:58.5, so I did go 1.5 seconds quicker than that lap you just saw there, so there is more in it. Still, I'm very intrigued to see what you guys can do. For those of you that want to try that, let me know in the comments below how you get on, what lap time you're able to achieve. I'm sure some of you will actually be able to beat a 1:58.5. I felt like there was even more in it. And yeah, that's it for today, so I hope you enjoyed the video guys. Give it a thumbs up if you did, sub to the channel if you really enjoyed it, and I'll definitely see you on a video very, very soon. So yeah, see you next time.